Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Devin from Haas Auto West, and today we're going to put some motor mounts into this 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee. Should be exactly the same on the 92 through 95 Cherokee, and it's probably the same for all of the 5.2 liters. We're going to need some 18 millimeter wrenches and sockets. I've got some PB Blaster to loosen things up. And in the dealer service manual, we're in section 9-47 on the 5.2 liter engine, and figure 3 is the engine front mounts. So first thing we're going to do, it says under removal, is we're going to disconnect the negative battery cable. Let's get started. Alright, so here's my battery, here's my negative connection. Just going to take that off real quick. Make sure we're not going to mess anything up electrically. Now we're just going to go underneath the vehicle and get a light. I can show you what I've done. Taken my bottle jack and I've got it set up here with a piece of wood between the bottle jack and the engine oil pan. And we want to transfer as much energy from the pan and spread it out as we can. We want to try to avoid these two cooler lines as well. But I've got it set up so that I can jack it up a couple times. And then you can see our motor mount here on the driver's side. I'm going to do the driver's side one first. And the first thing we're going to do is loosen up this main nut that goes on the bolt through it. And then we'll take a little bit of pressure off the motor mount by jacking the engine up. So we're going to get an 18 millimeter box wrench and an 18 millimeter socket to take that off, or just 2 box wrenches, either way. We're on the driver's side here. Anyway, I'm on that front nut, and I've got my bolt on the back one. And depending on the condition of your bolt, you may have to keep going with it all the way to the end. Okay, so this is what's called the through bolt, because it goes through the motor mount and through this tab that's attached to the engine bay. So again, we're just going to lift up a little bit more till we take the pressure off of it. And I'm going to go grab a mallet really quick so that I can just tap on it. And hopefully taking just the right amount of pressure off of it, this will go through without damaging the threads at all. If you feel like it's still kind of grabbing, go ahead and pull it up a little bit more, or let it down a little bit more, so you find what feels like the right amount of pressure. And you just want to pop this bolt through without damaging it. Now, if you get it most of the way and it still won't come, sometimes it's good to take a punch and put it through the center. You can use that punch again later when we line it up. I'm going to go grab a punch. Okay, so I've got a hammer here, and I've got a punch, and the punch is flat on the end. So I don't want to hurt my bolt. And just realize that this engine could shift on you when the motor mount moves, so try to make sure you're not in its way. And I'm just going to take the punch and continue pushing it out. Okay, so that's most of the way. I reach back here, take a look at the bolt. The angle should let you know something about whether you should be coming up more. Should let you take a look at how it's stuck in there. And mind you, most of the bolt is already halfway through. If you go too far, it may get trapped. And you may need to do the opposite, which is let it down slightly. It looks like it's getting worse. So I'm going to keep going up. Yeah, I can see my bolt is leveling out there. And it gets the point of being totally level. I should be able to just pull it out by hand without too much effort. Sometimes you might have to screw it out once it's really close, because you might have a thread still catching, but there we go. Like I said, be careful, your engine may move on you. The last little bit of this bolt comes out. All right, so there's our through bolt removed. I'm going to stick the nut on it. I'm going to place it on the ground with the threads towards the front to help remind myself that that's how it's oriented when it's installed. All right, now we're going to get our PB blaster. We're going to hit these bolts that hold it to the engine. Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about. Here are the two bolts that hold the motor mount to the engine itself. This is a tab on the front of the engine. So I'm going to set it up so that hopefully we can keep an eye on that spot. Okay, so we're talking about these guys right here. This one and this one. Those two right there. So my first move is going to be to take some PB blaster, go over each of them. Without the through bolt, pretty much the weight should be off the engine entirely. And while I'm at it, I'm going to hit the back two, because this side has 4 bolts that hold it to the engine. Yeah. You might have to reach behind the axle or in above the control arm to do this. This one's kind of funny. Alright, so let's double check that they are an 18 millimeter. Yep, feels about right. And I'm just going to get in there with my socket wrench and take these bolts out. Sun is shining, weather is sweet now. Okay, so there's one. Want to do the other one? Make you wanna move. Dancing feet now. Okay, I'm gonna actually leave this higher one in. It's just about halfway to help hold the entire motor mount straight while I get the other two. All right, now moving on to the back. Okay, so it looks like these back ones are a 15. Get a different wrench real quick. Okay, I'm using a small extension here to get away from the socket slightly. I'm not sure it's really going to help me much. We'll see. In any case, make sure you're loosening them. Okay, so there's a nut on the engine tab side, on the other side of the engine tab. On this 15, it needs to be held with a box wrench if you want to get it to come undone. I've got one more, and it's going to be quite hard to hold in place when I torque it. Yep, okay. So let's see about taking it out though. So I'm coming in behind the track bar and up onto the bracket. So the lower one was a 15, but the upper one is back to being an 18. And there's a tab sticking out of the engine that might get in my way. So I'm actually going to get a smaller 3/8 drive version of this. 3/8 18mm socket. Let's see if I can do this way. Again, I'm behind the track bar with my arm. Gonna try with my short 18mm 3/8 drive socket. Okay, now I'm finally on it at least. Okay, to hold the nut on the front, I have this 18mm that's got sort of a joint in it. And we can reach up here above the motor mount and then get a hand on the nut with it. Okay, so if you can, you might have to use two hands to get it situated. Get a wrench on the nut, hold it in place while you twist out the bolt. And it may take it a second to catch, or a few rotations to catch. And you can see the whole motor mount is twisting a little bit now because it's free. Oh, and my wrench is also free. Yeah, keeping the wrench holding the nut in place is not very easy. I guess there's not much to see here. It's just gonna take a mountain of patience to get this off. Of course, it probably was fun doing whatever we did that broke the motor mount in the first place. Unless it's just old and worn out. In which case, good for you that you had it live that long. I know you guys, you probably tried to send it. And now it's broken because it hit the ground at 45 miles an hour. How I broke mine was I rebuilt the transmission, and in the process the jack was loose at one point and bent them down till they broke. So that's just on me for being stupid, really. Probably not the dumbest thing I've done. In any case, just keep paying attention where that wrench on the back is actually holding anything. Play us some music, it's a reggae music. Play us some music, it's a reggae music. Just smashing my finger. I got this wrench up against the motor mount, holding the nut. And then I'm gonna take my other wrench and come from behind the track bar. And you can see the whole thing is pretty loose now. It's just pivoting on this last bolt. So I'm not really working on tension on the engine tab or the motor mount. I'm just working on getting this nut off at this point. I'm basically just fighting the corrosion on the bolt. Alright, here we are back underneath the vehicle at the absolute engineering marvel that is the 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee, or as we are fond of calling it, the ZJ. So we have all of our pieces. Let's see if we can remove the old assembly engine mount. So I've still got this bolt here holding it in the front. Just going to continue loosening it till the whole thing comes out. Alright, and that bolt went on that side. Not 100% certain that they aren't the same, but whatever. So we're going to take it out. Okay, so that was a nightmare. But I finally got the upper bolt that holds the motor mount to the engine tab off. And I checked it out. It's a 7/16 at 14 taps per inch. So I'm going to go ahead and get my 18 millimeter. Find it here. And just to make it a little easier, I'm going to go ahead and run this die down it. Because boy, it really wasn't easy to get it off. So we're just gonna do that to this bolt real quick and then back it off again. And hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to put back together with our new motor mount. Cool. So here's my replacement motor mount. You can see that there are a couple of nuts here on the front side where we pulled the two bolts out, but there's still no nuts on the back side, so we're going to need to reuse our originals, and we're going to need to do this one first so that we have a little bit of play to get in there. It's probably going to be just as annoying as it was. Alright, so let's take a look at our instructions really quick. Installation says if the sill bracket assembly was removed, install the bracket in the sill assembly, so we're not going to do that. And then it says on the left side, install the sill bracket assembly onto the sill assembly. Install and tighten the top two bolts to 40 foot-pounds torque and install and tighten the 2 side bolts to 70 foot-pounds. And then the bottom 2 bolts will be torqued to 89 foot-pounds. But because the sill assembly is still in the vehicle, I'm not going to mess with any of that. We are going to position the engine support insulator assembly onto the engine block, that's this, and then we're going to install the bolts and tighten them all to 65 foot-pounds. Then we're going to lower it and put the through bolt through and tighten it to 48 foot-pounds. So that's 65 foot-pounds for all 4 of these and 48 foot-pounds for the bolt that goes through there. I tried to get my bolts to thread into these nuts that are built into the motor mount, and they would not thread. And you're probably supposed to use a different kind of bolt, maybe the bolts for the later ZJs. And I figured out that they are 14 taps per inch, 7/16. So I ran a tap down these nuts. And now they will probably both thread. This is not my favorite thing to do ever. So this is not an OEM part, obviously, but I have made it into one. So something you want to check before you're stuck under the vehicle trying to do this is that these bolts will actually go in. So now that they will go in, hopefully I haven't screwed them up too bad, and we can go back to installing them. And our next move is going to be to transfer these dust covers over. So here's one of my dust covers, and then here's the other dust cover. I'm going to take our old engine mount and set it aside. And then we're going to place the dust covers onto our new one. Just want them to go back in the place they came off of. And it looks something like this with the dust covers on it. Now we're going to go ahead and take that same bolt that we just took out, and we're going to gently move this whole thing back into position. And hopefully without too much effort, we can get it to go in between these things and line up with where it came out. So mind you, I'm going for the outer bolt of the 2 on the front here, and you should be able to get it to line up with the nut that's built in to the motor mount. Careful not to cross thread it. Be sure to wiggle it around and make sure you're getting that bolt to seat correctly. Looking pretty good. Now I'm going to take my 18mm bolt and my 18mm nut. I'm going to place the nut in my weird folding wrench here, like this guy, like so. And we're just going to go back over the top of the entire motor mount. Break in. See if I can even find the spot I need to be in. Alright, starting this top bolt. Well started. Now taking my 18 nut and bolt To start the back one. Of course, it's always fun to even line it up. There it is. Through the hole. That's nice. Held with a box wrench if you want to get it to come undone. Okay, so there's a nut on the engine tab side, on the other side of the engine tab. On this 15, it needs to be... Alright, hopefully there's somebody with an absolutely mammoth amount of patience, because it took all day. Alright, here we didn't take our bolt now and see where we're at in relation to the hole. It's pretty far off, actually. So now, taking a look at both of them, I'm going to see where I think we need to go. Going up, I'm feeling the face of the mount. And still nothing lining up yet. Getting close though. Alright, so I'm going to take my punch that I used to tap it out, try to put it in the front. That's a pretty good sign that I can put it in the front. And then I'm going to go into the back with my bolts and take a look at where I'm at. Maybe I can take the punch and use it because it's smaller than the bolt to line up my hole and wiggle it around until I think maybe it might go in. Now, if I can't get it to start, using a mallet, I may be able to tap on it a little bit from behind. Not a lot of clearance between this bolt and the exhaust at this point. But shoot, gotta do it somehow. Again, I'm gonna push up a little bit more. Yeah, I've run out of room. Feels like I've gone a little bit too high. Maybe I'll twist it a little bit. Let it come down some. Check again with my punch. Just wiggle it around some. Okay, I've sort of twisted it in place. I can see that it's pointing downward. Usually that indicates that I should come down on the jack a little bit. And ideally it might go in right where it came out. So we can go down a little bit again. Feels like maybe I went too far. Yeah. Keeping some pressure on it. Back up, couple moves. So checking out the front again. Front doesn't look too lined up anymore. Looks very off to one side. Put the front pin in there. So I can come down a little bit more. Looks like it's outside where it needs to be. I'm going to get a different kind of punch. Okay, I've got like a tapered punch. It gets wider as it goes in. And sometimes these are pretty good to help in this situation. Because we need to line up the front and back. So as I push this in, it moves it in the ears a little bit. It gets a little bit closer to where it's going. Same thing with the back side. Not sure what's going on there, so I just try to put the punch in there. As I push it forward, hopefully it'll line up on the hole a little bit better. go, it should stay put. They still can't get it in, and they have to manipulate it from the front hole. Try pushing on it different directions until I find something that helps to get this bolt to go in. Seems like it needs to be a little bit higher. Jack it up some more. Using my pin on the front. I mentioned the pin might be in your way. It's really a punch, I guess. But maybe by then you'll have been able to get it to move. Okay, so again, when you get to the front, may have gone most of the way through. Gonna have to get the punch back in there and adjust the location. Can't get any leverage. It's probably not in the right place yet. Or if maybe I've got it jacked up too tall. It takes messing around with it a little. Pull the bolt back slightly so that I can get this pin in there. Alright, next crowbar. And I need to push on it. To line up with the hole. So I've got crowbar. I'm pushing up against the body. Almost got it started there. To get it to go through. Alright. I'm going to get my nut. And go ahead and start that. And I'm going to get my 18mm wrench and hang it off the back here. And get my 18 socket. And now I'm going to need adapter for my torque wrench, so we can put this guy at 48 foot-pounds. So let me go grab my adapter. Set our torque wrench to 48. Hopefully in the process of getting through there it didn't get too damaged. Okay. Awful close. Nice big torque wrench. foot-pounds. Alright, that's the driver's side. Ugh, that took all day. Probably should have used air tools when removing it. I'm not going to do the other side till tomorrow. So we're done with the driver's side motor mount and moving on to the passenger side motor mount. I actually got this one from Westar, and special thanks to the guys at Clark's Discount Auto. Got it for me for half the price of basically every other auto parts store. So definitely worth supporting those local businesses when you can. And we're going to go ahead and start removing the passenger side motor mount from the engine bay. Okay, so back at it once again. Let's get our bottle jack, or whatever jack you're going to use to hold your engine. And make sure that it's tight. Just going to take this block of wood and put it up against the engine. Make sure I'm going to miss the exhaust, and make sure I'm going to miss the transcoolers. And like dealer service manual said, we are going to lift up on the engine just slightly. So slightly, sort of a relative term here. I'm going to give it 3 or 4. Maybe right about there. And of course, we're going to have to adjust that at some point. So, we're going to be focusing on our passenger motor mount now, which is right above our steering stabilizer. And we're going to need an 18mm box wrench or 2 to take that nut off of the center bolt there. Okay, I've got a smaller ratcheting 18. I'm going to use that, try to make this go a little bit faster. Maybe the leverage of the longer one though. Yeah, there we go, our other one's moving now. Let's see, now that I'm moving, if I can get it with this ratcheting one. Alright, I'm getting pretty close. Probably take the rest of it off by hand. And taking a look at my jack. I want to come up a little bit more. I see some movement on the actual motor mount. Let's try tapping on it and see if it moves yet. Nice. Okay, I was able to at least move it out beginning wise. Still feels pretty trapped in there. I'm going to get a little bit more elevation. And then I'm going to get a punch. Okay, I've got a punch and a regular hammer. Line myself up on it. Okay, I pushed it through somewhat. Still looks like I need to come up on the jack. You can kind of see from the angle of the bolt which way you need to go. So try wiggling it a little bit more. Feels pretty trapped in there. Let's see. tap on it anymore. Just be careful of your radiator. Alright, that bolt's moving out little by little. Okay, that's as far as I can go with that size pin. And still feels a little bit trapped. See if moving it can change that. See if getting a longer punch might help me. This is actually a thinner punch, so it might fit a little farther in there. See how this does in helping me get it. Doesn't appear to be moving very much. So, let's see if I can come down on the jack just slightly. How things change. Do they get better? Or do they get worse? You should be able to feel with your hand whether you're putting more tension on it or whether there's going to be less tension on it as you move up and down. Feels like I've taken most of the tension off of it. Now I'm actually threading it out. That last little bit's catching on the thread. But I feel like I've taken almost all the tension off the bolt. And I've probably lifted the engine about 2.5 inches at this point. Alright, so there's our center pin. Yeah, this wiring harness is totally in my way. So, the wiring harness goes to the starter. If there's not any other way of removing these bolts, you may need to disconnect it from the starter. And in fact, that looks like what I'm going to have to do. There's also a clip or two nearby that hold it to the engine. Boy, it's never easy, is it? So yeah, that's going to be a fun part of the adventure. Let's take a look back here. Looks like it's a 1/4 inch socket and a 1/2 inch socket it's going to take to disconnect the starter. Let me go grab those. Looks like the smaller connection is a 5/16. So let's start there. I've got a very long extension and a 1/4 inch drive socket. Let's see if I can show you guys what that goes with. Yeah. So that's the smaller of the two connections on the starter. Probably got a washer too if I know it. Okay, so the nut is in there. Put my little magnetic tray here, along with the socket. And let's see if I can pull the washer off. Yep, there's the washer. Alright. Now, next to it, but actually above it, of the starter, is what I believe to be a 1/2-inch nut. Let's go ahead and find out if I remember what I'm talking about. Okay, it looks like it. Okay, so there's the nut. And then I'm going to reach up there and recover the washer as I pull the connection off. Really important that you disconnected the battery earlier in the process, like I said, before doing that part. Okay, so there's a clip. There's a clip right here on the wiring if your stuff is still remotely OEM. And that clip, if you press it closed and push it open, should be able to come apart. It might take a screwdriver. It's always a fun one, this guy. Seems easier than it actually is. Yeah, it's going to try and drop some crud in your eye. Okay, so bending this guy out of the way, should be able to get this wire loose and then come forward with it, get it out of our way. Alright, so now we're back over here looking at our motor mount. Let's move you guys back where you can see. Here's our motor mount, and here's our wiring that we just moved. Okay, so the passenger side motor mount is held in place with 2 different 18mm bolts that have a nut on the back, but you may be able to get a small 18mm wrench to be able to take it off. Alright, so I've got my wrench wedged in there to hold the bottom of the front 2 nuts. Not sure you can even see it. Back off a little. So yeah, here's the wrench right here. And it's on the front of the motor mount on the lower bolt. So now I'm going to come around to the back with my 18mm socket wrench and attempt to remove that same nut from the back side of this bolt. So here we go, and hopefully I'm missing the steering stabilizer. And let's think about it real quick. We need to be pushing toward the passenger side to break this nut. And just try not to do it in such a way that you hurt yourself. It's not going to want to go at first. Every once in a while, keep an eye on your wrench and make sure it's still on there. Okay. Cool. I need to paint my steering stabilizer. Getting nice and rusty. So some of this other stuff. Alright, once you get it really loose, you'll be able to turn the nut off by hand. Cool. Okay, so now I'm going to push on the bolt and see if I can wiggle the front of it Doesn't feel like it wants to go anywhere. I get my little hammer here. Try and line up in such a way that I can see it. Yeah, and I'm just gonna tap it toward the front of the Jeep. Doesn't want to go anywhere yet. So I may have to loosen up the other bolt before it's going to move. Alright, so I'm pulling my front wrench back off. And now I'm reaching up. The angle is going to be a lot worse. So I'm going to reach up in there and attempt to wiggle my wrench onto it. Well, looks like it went on there pretty good actually. And this time it's not quite hitting it the same, but it may stay put nevertheless. Okay, so coming back around onto the back side of the motor mount. Oh, okay, so I've got a tab on the engine block in my way. So if you were using a larger 18mm socket, we're going to have to go ahead and get our small 18mm socket. Looks more like this guy. So go ahead and reach behind this tab on the engine. And it just barely fits. Okay. So again, it might give way, and you might slam your hand into your light or the spring. Damn, that really hurt. Okay, but you know it gave way because it moved. Okay. And I was just about to warn you not to push so hard that when it gives way you slam your hand into something. But I guess self-fulfilling prophecy there. Anyway, nut is moving. I can see the wrench is holding on the front. Maybe that's all I can really hope for right now. And that was the wrench giving way and hitting me in the face. Maybe if you get lucky, you won't drop it on your face like I just did. Right. At least I can see it now. So I'm going to take one hand and hold the wrench like I was sort of just ignoring I should do before. And keep going with the nut over here. Oh yeah. So we've gone pretty far and our wrench looks like it's ready to get trapped. So let's not go any further. Gotta roll the wrench off to the right side to keep it from getting trapped. Just being aware that the wrench could totally get trapped up against that tab behind it on the engine. We're going to gradually move it out. But we're going to try to make sure we can still get it off of there. Because what happens is you have to reverse the wrench, and it gets really annoying. Alright, let's see where we are now. Can I move it by hand? Just barely, yeah, okay. So just before I trapped the wrench, I was able to start moving it by hand. Wonderful. Alright, now both nuts are off. And our motor mount is still pretty much trapped in position. Yep, sure is. So I'm not sure how much weight is on or off it right now. I might just go ahead and add a little bit of tension with the jack, jacking it up a little, and I'm going to take my mallet here and see if it moves at all. Doesn't appear to move. Looks pretty trapped. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and let it down some using gravity, and you can see that the whole motor mount is coming down. Keep an eye on the light before I destroy it. Okay, that's about as far as I can go, and you can see it's fallen out of the spot it was in. Okay, so the lower one is moving out. I can't really hit the upper one the way that things are right now. But I did manage to move out the lower one some. Still feels kind of trapped. Gonna take my ratcheting wrench. I can just barely move it enough that it's starting to come out. This is a lot easier when it's on a hoist, let me tell you. Okay, so if you get to the point it seems like you're just going back and forth, I'm going to try and move it by hand. Oh, just had it completely go back in, so I'm going to guess I can get it out. Now there is a second connection on this wiring harness that you might need to remove. That's my first bolt. So that's going to be up to your discretion whether you think you need to take that second bit off the wiring harness. We'll see, I might end up doing it too. Okay, so now I can see my second bolt up there. And it's pretty trapped. So maybe I'll come back up on the engine just a little bit. See, it started moving there. About the best I'm probably going to be able to do. Okay, so the tab in the engine has a hole through it that's in our way. And our smaller punch looks like it'll fit through it. So I'm just going to go ahead and go right through that tab with my smaller punch. See if I can't punch this guy out. I'm reaching behind the axle now. And I've got it lined up on it. And then let me just get it out of my hand a little. You grab your handle near the lower part. Alright, well, moved it fairly significantly by putting this punch right through the tab that was pretty much completely in my way. And I'm able to move it quite a bit more. Okay, so it feels like I'm hitting the wiring harness again, but I did move it fairly significantly. And yeah, I can come up here and see the wiring harness is in my way. I'm going to try shoving up on it. Let's see if it'll move. Yeah, it is really close to coming out. Close but no cigar. Alright, so there's a clip on the wiring harness. If you open that clip up, it may move farther. And if you unscrew that clip, it may move farther, depending on how you feel about it. I feel like this bolt is almost free. Oh, there we go. Wow. Alright. So there's the bolt. That's both the bolts that hold the motor mount in place. So now, it's just trapped. Great. Alright, so cool. We're gonna bring our jack down some. And let me pull that. Okay, and that is about all she wrote. Engine's not coming down much farther than that. And you can see I've still got a little bit to go. So I'm going to take my punch again and see if I can just pull down on it. There we go. Alright, so there's our motor mount removed. Oh boy, got a lot of dirt on my face. Okay, so here's the motor mount that I just took out. You can take the dust covers off. You can see my old dust cover here looks like it's gotten beat up pretty bad. Gonna have to reuse it anyway though, because I don't have any others with me. And then here is my new motor mount. Always check your technology and make sure it looks good. This old one says made in Thailand on it. And this one says it's made by Westar. Doesn't exactly tell me where it was made. So taking a look at my dust covers again, I'm going to put this one back on the front the way it was, and this other one on the back the way it was-ish. Cool. And imagining how it just came out, that's how it's gonna go back in. Left to right it is different, so make sure it's going back in the way it came out. In this case, this goes towards the front and everything else goes oriented that way. Alright, so now we're going to wiggle it back into position where it just was. There are the two tabs coming out of the frame for the motor mount, and above them are the two tabs coming out of the engine. So I'm going to go for that top one, and it appears that maybe the one I had before was a little bent, because now things look like they're going to come together pretty easily. I'm going to get the end of my bolt up above the wiring harness there, and then attempt to guide it into place in the tab. Not the easiest one-handed operation ever. We definitely want to try and put that top bolt in first. And be sure to wiggle everything a little bit as you push it through. Alright, now I've got the top bolt in place. And I'm going to get my bottom bolt and attempt to do the same. So then wiggling the bottom one around, got it through. Cool. Alright, so now both my bolts to hold the motor mount to the engine are in place. I'm going to go ahead and leave the wiring disconnected for now. While I go ahead and thread the nuts onto those bolts. So, starting with the higher one. Depending on where you're at, you might reach all the way behind the axle. It's probably the easiest, actually. Depends how long your arm is. And ever so gently, just gonna thread that nut onto the bolt. And move it as far as I can with my fingers until it starts to turn the front part. Cool. Now, in the interest of the other bolt not falling out, I'm going to go ahead and do something similar. I don't think it was in my way too much. Ow. That was my head. Go ahead and just thread it on there a good portion of the way. Alright. Let's check out our torque specs. Alright, and just like the other side, the engine insulator needs to be tightened to 65 foot-pounds. So I'm going to go ahead and get my torque wrench and set it to 65 foot-pounds. I'm not going to use my torque wrench until it actually feels tight. But I am set up at 65. Putting a hand wrench on the uppermost bolt to hold it in place. Go ahead and wiggle it around till I get it on there. And at first I might just want to hold it. See if I can get it stuck in there at some point. Now I'm either going to use my ratcheting 18 millimeter, or so I'm going to see if I can twist it some more by hand. And I'll still keep going a little bit. Looks like I've reached as far as I'm going to be able to go that way. And let's try again with our short socket on our full-size socket wrench. Alright, looks like it's close. Yeah. Looks like I can do that. Alright. So, holding it with the box wrench on the front, and turning it with the socket wrench on the back. Yeah, this is not the easiest thing to do. Engine tab is really in your way. But I've gotten behind it with my short socket. And it is moving. And I'm managing to hold the front. But I don't have a lot of leverage because of where I'm working from. So let's see if I can get some better leverage. Okay, so here I am. Now I'm next to the steering stabilizer. You guys might not be able to see what I'm doing right now. I grabbed the light and move it, but I'm afraid of dropping it on my face, so I'm not going to do that. I don't know how well this torque wrench is going to fit in there, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to get it pretty much as far as I can before I use the torque wrench. Okay, it's starting to get pretty tight. Okay, so pulling my wrench out, gonna attempt to transfer my socket over to the torque wrench without letting go the wrench in my left hand, which is holding the front of the bolt. Part of why I already set up my torque wrench for this move. Okay, I'm moving my hand onto the handle of the torque wrench first. And coming behind the tab. Yeah, does not look like it's going to be able to get on there. Okay. So if you're using a smaller torque wrench, like an inch-pound torque wrench, you might be able to get it in there, but you might be able to get this guy, the crow's foot. Go get your crow's foot, get it to 65 foot-pounds. Alright, that's about as tight as I can get it by hand. And that's going to have to be good enough. So, moving down to the lower bolt, I'm going to move my wrench onto the lower bolt on the outside here. And definitely a little easier than what I did the first time, without the wiring in my way. Put it back on that spot. Not really too much reason you need the longer socket. Might change where your hand is a little, but man, it might not change enough to matter. So moving by hand here. Get my lower bolt in place. Okay, keep an eye on the front of your bolt. Make sure your wrench is really on there. You don't want to twist it out. I'm just going to double check that I'm actually fully on there on the front side. Looks good. Alright. Getting close again. You know, it's possible I overdid that first one a little. But not going to worry about it too much. I'm going to take my socket, put it over on my torque wrench. Make sure the back of it is tight. And slowly work it back into position. And between the track bar and the, what are you, the drag link? Looks like I'm between the track bar and the drag link, next to the steering stabilizer. Okay. And tightening while holding the wrench on the front. The engine hits the torque wrench just slightly. Might not be able to get it all the way onto the nut as a result. So try to be patient with that aspect of things. Just don't want to wreck the nut in the process. Yeah, just moving it in every time, pushing it towards the bolt. Now, if I'm smart, probably should switch to the other socket, because because it's not quite seating all the way. And we really want it to seat as far as possible. Yeah, now I'm behind the track bar. And looks like I can get it to seat all the way. Careful of your cooler lines. Sort of in your way. Oh, alright, and there's my wrench on the front slipping off. Okay, reseating everything. Pay attention for the click on your torque wrench. Sometimes it's just a doink. Got a lot of play in the torque wrench right now. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and double check how my torque wrench is doing. Sometimes it can get a little stuck, and we don't want that. We want to make sure it's actually moving. Try to go slow at this last part. A little on the frustrating side. Yeah, sometimes you gotta move it twice to get it to click. I've actually switched hands. Okay, so I'm not getting a click out of my torque wrench, but I am getting a doink. So, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. It means I am at 65 foot-pounds. It just means that the torque wrench is not doing that great. It's not perfect. But it is really tight. Alright, so next move is going to be to go ahead and jack things up until we start to see the hole in the center of the motor mount line up. Make sure it's tight on the jack again. Yeah, we're going to keep an eye on this hole in the motor mount till we start to see it line up with the frame tab. There might be another name for that thing. I'm going to call it the frame tab. Okay, you should see movement on the motor mount. And once you think it might be lined up, go ahead and reach on the back here. Put a finger in and feel for the hole to line up. Cool. Ooh, shit. Be very careful that you don't get your finger caught in there, because it might move like it just did. That scared me. Okay. Another thing you can use instead of your finger, that'll be smart, is your punch. So we take our tapered punch, and we're going to wiggle it into the hole, and we're going to wiggle up and down a little bit, and feel that it feels lined up. And we could probably do the same thing on the front. Yeah, okay. Now that we've got it almost into position, I'm going to take the bolt that goes through the motor mount and start it into the back side. Okay, so it probably won't go right in. We need to jack up on it slightly now. But bam! Oh, this time we got a little bit lucky and it went all the way through. Cool. So now I have free movement on this bolt, which is just ideal. And I'm going to start the nut by hand. And then we're going to set our torque wrench to 48 foot-pounds. It's 48 foot-pounds. So there's probably a mark for 45. Line up with 0 plus 3. There we are at 48. And I'm going to use a hand wrench and a ratcheting hand wrench to move it close to where it's got to go. Alright, once you feel it's on there all the way, go ahead and switch to the torque wrench. And I'm going to move my hand wrench till it gets trapped and just hold it in place while I torque the front nut using the torque wrench. Alright, got my click, double, and work both my wrenches off. Definitely don't drop your torque wrench, it's really bad for it. I want it to work. Gotta set it down gently. Alright, and now we're gonna find the wiring that we disconnected from the starter and take a look at where it's routed. It should go back where it came from. And we're gonna go ahead and put the clip back together that it goes through. Looks real good. To where the starter is. Going to look at my wiring. Still got my battery disconnected, so it shouldn't be too scary. Even this can be scary if you don't have it disconnected. Well, at least shocking, maybe not scary. And if you have a weird little pigtail hanging around because your version of the Jeep did not have a oil level sensor like mine, just be sure to keep track of it. Alright, I'm going to do the 13mm/1/2 inch connector first. They're both on there though. And get that started by hand. And double checking that I didn't pull the other one off. Get as far as I can on there. Alright, now I've got my 13mm socket and a couple of extensions, one of which is wobbly in this case. Not sure if you have to have that, but just telling you what I did. Alright, and then we're going to tighten this connection back for the starter. Alright, don't go crazy, but make sure it's tight. And then I'm going to switch over to my 1/4 inch drive and put the washer back on the other connection and take the in this case I'm not going to try to do it by hand because it's stuck in my socket. But reaching up, this is a 5/16 again. So twisting my 5/16. So I've just got the long extension in my hand, twisting it relatively as far as I can go before I use the wrench. It's quite a few spins. Alright, now that I've kind of gotten as far as I can go with the extension, attaching my ratchet. And there. So that's both connections to the starter. And hopefully your 5/16 socket comes right off. And now we're just going to take it right out of our way up our bottle jack. And those are our motor mounts on this 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee. You might want to take another look at that front wiring harness clip where you probably bent it apart to get the motor mount bolts out. So that concludes our video of how to put in the motor mounts on this 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee. Should be the same for just about any ZJ. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe to this video if you want to help me out, or if you just would like to get more things like this in the future related to Jeeps and Mopars. Happy wrenching and have a good day.